Let's get peppy! It is one day to go until D-Day. When I say D-Day, I mean Dog Day. Tomorrow is the Dog Day afternoon when I am going to pick up my whippet. Very exciting. And to celebrate, I'm here with Mr. D himself, Dr. Dave. I can't really extend this analogy any further than D. How you going, Dave?
Good. Does the dog have a name? Will you not divulge it for privacy reasons?
I'm worried that the dog will receive doggy pizza
Could
from
I suggest
pranksters.
George W. Bush, where the W stands for Whippet?
Oh, that's very good. That's very good. He already does have a name, I'm afraid. His name is Mercury, which is a very weird name.
Mercury?
Yes, my daughter, who I will not name because she doesn't need any more personality defects.
Right.
By being listed on the internet.
Yeah.
My daughter named him Mercury because Mercury is the messenger of the gods in Roman mythology.
Okay.
So you can see she does take after me in the nerd way.
That is.
That's right.
But obviously Mercury is also shared with Freddie Mercury.
That's true. Who
Yes.
was not a whippet, but that's
No,
okay.
but who wrote some songs
was
that you
thin.
might want to watch out for, like I Want to Break Free,
Oh.
Don't Stop Me Now.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, those are kind of inauspicious for a very fast dog.
yes, that's true.
So heed the warnings of Mercury the Messenger is all I'm saying.
I stand warned.
Yes.
Do you have any news from your holidays? I'm just talking about dogs. I know you're not even Dr. Dave anymore, are you? This is a fiction. You're Associate Professor Dave.
I am an associate professor now. That is true.
Doesn't really trip off the tongue, though.
So
does it?
the promotions committee at University of Sydney must have been listening to all of our PEPs and thought, yeah, we've got to promote him.
Do you think we can take credit?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just
but-
one thing to add into the terrible jumble of names we've had. Now it won't no longer be Dr. Dave. Pepper Chaz.
No, it's still Dr. Dave.
Let's call him Dr. Dave.
I'm not
'cause-
changing. I'm not changing my.
I can't
title.
change the podcast.
No.
Yeah,
No,
Associate
especially
Professor
since
Dave
the
really
abbreviation of Associate Professor is ASPROF,
Yeah, that's true.
which I'm not quite ready for that yet. So,
Fair enough.
I read Hilary Mantel's novels about Henry VIII and watched a lot of cricket.
Are the Henry VIII novels going to make it into the book list?
They've really got nothing to do with America. Like they're literally written prior. Well, they're written
That's okay.
in the 21st century, but they're set prior to European settlement.
Is Mark Howard's BBL commentary going to make it into the book list?
Oh my god!
I'm expecting not.
Fucking hell! No, if you know what we're talking about, I'm deeply sorry.
Okay, we should get right into it because, as always, got a bit of a time limit. So,
Yes.
First of all, I spoke about the insurrection at considerable length with Bill Wyman on Wednesday. Thank you very much, Bill Wyman. But you may have something to weigh in about insurrections.
Yeah, so I did get quite into this sort of semantic question
Yeah.
around whether it is a coup
Yes.
or
Okay.
not.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, not really.
Okay. So I think that this is actually a very important question, and there's a lot of division out there. Like I've spoken to people who are absolutely adamant that even if it was a failed coup, it was a coup, and it is quite important in terms of just the memory of how are we actually going to remember this event. I mean, the charges that are going to be leveled against Trump are all to do with insurrection.
Yes.
But if you consider it a coup, then you're considering it as something potentially more serious than that. So I would like to go into a little bit about the kinds of debates that were happening around whether or not this was a coup. On the day of the riot, Paul Musgrave, who is a political scientist that I respect a lot at the University of Amherst, he wrote a piece in Foreign Policy saying, this is a coup. This is an attempted coup, and the only reason why we're not calling it is because Americans are so unaccustomed to thinking about their own system in this way.
I guess, I've interrupted you immediately.
Yeah.
I guess if they got their way, Like if
Yeah.
if the Viking horn man just made them part
Right.
like the Red Sea,
Yes.
and they just walked through and got their way, it would have been a change in government.
Yes.
So I guess that is a coup.
And I will
An
come back
attempted
to this, the question of success. Okay, so, yeah, Paul's saying it's just so ingrained in Americans that coups are something that happen in other countries. That's why we can't recognise it. That's why we can't recognise how sick and fragile the system is and how close it came to toppling over, essentially. So that was Paul Musgrave. Nonihal Singh, who is one of political science's foremost experts on coups, wrote the definitive book about the dynamics of coups, though, argues that it was not a coup. And that the missing fact, the big missing factor was the military. Okay, now, and this is where among political scientists, the argument sort of tends to break down. Those who believe that the military is essentially a required factor and those who believe that it's not. So Paul argues that it's not a required factor. Nonihal argues that it is a required factor.
I thought when the military's involved, they call it an armed coup. Or is that just bullshit? Might be.
Well, it's not like there's, an official definition.
Yeah, sure.
Out there. I mean, it's not like physics or biology or something where there are definitive definitions of things. There just are not. The contestation over it is part of politics itself. So he argues that it wasn't a coup because the military was not involved. In fact, he says there was basically no state power involved at all. That it was this weird situation where you have the most powerful man on earth, you have the leader of the United States government, not actually using the power of the United States government, instead using this mob of citizens against the United States government without actually invoking the power of the state, which he potentially has control over. Now, others have argued, but that's not the full story here because, certainly for a while the military stayed out of it and allowed it to happen. There were members of the Capitol Police, at least 5 of them, who seem to have essentially backed the insurrectionists.
Also, there's probably a fine line, I imagine, at times between the military and militias.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, that is very true.
And there were militias involved.
Well, there were certainly militias involved, or self-styled militias. A lot of Americans get a bit tetchy about calling them militias because they say militia is this honourable tradition, and these groups like the Three Percenters and the Oath Keepers are not. Now, okay, having considered this fairly carefully, I'm actually going to come down on the side of Nonihal Singh here. As much as I really respect Paul Musgrave and he's a good friend of mine, I'm coming down on Nonihal Singh's side. And part of the reason why is that, as this was happening, basically everyone knew that this had no chance of succeeding.
Yes.
Okay, so it wasn't just that it failed, it actually had no chance. And it's quite clear that although some of the people involved probably did think it had a chance, a lot of the actual insurrectionists didn't think that it had a chance either. So they were happy to just do stuff like smear shit on Nancy Pelosi's walls, or steal lecterns, or it was more about the chaos. And in the end, I do think that absence of the military is a very important, because that's what makes it impossible for it to succeed when you don't have the United States military involved. And yes, even though it took a long time for the military to get involved, ultimately the government did, ultimately Mike Pence did summon the power of the United States military against the insurrectionists, right? So the military, yes, it took a little while to get involved, but when it did, it was definitely on the side of the government, not on the side of the insurrectionists. And that brings us to this very important point made by Brian Klaas, who's another political scientist. In 2016, he wrote this essay, Why Coups Fail. Okay, and he was looking at it strictly from the point of view of the decisive factor is always the military. He said there are basically 2 types of coups. There's one that is precipitated by the military leadership. There's one that can be precipitated by lower orders of the military who take the rest of the military by surprise and who manage to win the military leadership over, which does happen from time to time. He says, though, when the military is very clearly politically divided, that makes coups very, very difficult. Right, divided military is one of the reasons why you've seen very few coups succeed in recent years. And coups, because of the fact that often people in the military don't know what the rest of the military is thinking, this leads to this key dynamic in coups. Like when the coup starts, who does the military side? Who do individual members of the military decide to side with? And so Klaas was writing about the failed coup in Turkey in 2016. I don't know if you remember this.
No.
But yeah, it was an insurrection started by part of the military that tried very, very hard to convince the rest of the military that this was inevitable. Yeah. Right? This is a really key factor in coups. You have to convince the people in power very quickly that this is inevitable so that everyone joins your side. If doubts start to kick in, you are going to fail. And that's what happened in Turkey. And often the success of coups can come down to really minute contingent factors. And Klaas has this great example of a failed coup in Zambia in 1997, where some low-level military officers broke into the home of a high-level military officer with the intent of dragging him to the radio station and announcing on air that the coup was happening. But the guy woke up just in time, fled into his backyard, jumped up onto his back wall, and apparently just managed to evade the grasp of this guy who got his pant leg and his pants came off, but he managed to flee over the garden wall and go and alert the government to it.
Well, the pantsless nature of this is reminiscent of the insurrection.
Yes. Yes. And then apparently the soldiers were all really depressed, so they drank the guy's imported Namibian beer in his fridge rather than getting the fuck out of there. Anyway, the whole point that I'm trying to make here is it didn't even get to that stage of are people in the military wondering whose side they're going to take.
Yeah.
Right. So in terms of the dynamics of how coups actually work, it didn't even get to that point. Now, I'm not downplaying the seriousness of what happened in the capital at all. Okay, it's pure election violence that really reveals very, very deep unsoundness within the American political system. The fact that it was able to happen showed that the insurrectionists were completely confident with justification that they wouldn't be stopped by the police or by any other authorities. It was happening at the same time as members of the legislature were trying to, at the behest of the president, to overturn the election result. It was a terrible event that showed all kinds of political weakness, but I don't think that it met the criteria for a coup, and I think that is important to keep in mind. I think the other thing was that when coups succeed, they nearly always need the backing of business.
Okay.
This would not have had the backing of business at all.
Well, I want to firstly thank you very much for explaining in detail exactly how to stage a successful coup.
Yes.
And I'm now expecting the hand of God to utilize that, possibly to announce the results on this podcast.
The big motto is,
like Zambia style.
it's not enough to get the pants. You have to get the leg.
Just to pick up on what you were talking about, with them being allowed to happen.
Yes.
I did see some interesting stats on that, which I didn't get into the last podcast, so I'll get into
Okay, get into them now.
Which was from The Guardian, which
Yes.
they compared the percentage of all left-wing organised demonstrations that resulted in the use of force by law enforcement.
Yes.
Versus demonstrations organised by right-wing groups.
Yes.
And it was 4.7% of left-wing resulted in law enforcement.
Yep.
1.4% of right-wing
Right.
resulted in law enforcement. Now, you might say, well, that's because the left-wing protests end up more violent. So the police got involved more often. That's why. Antifa, haven't you been paying attention? Well, they also then crunched the numbers for when demonstrators did not engage in any violence, vandalism, or looting, but were still met with tear gas, rubber bullets,
Yes.
or other force.
Yeah.
Left wing, 1.8%. Right wing, 0.5%. So there you go.
There you go.
That's some interesting numbers. The other thing which I didn't get into, I didn't get time to last week, on Wednesday, which I might as well just squeeze in now before we move on, was I talked about my concern about this kind of stuff. As soon as it happened, Bill asked me what my reaction was when I was watching it, and I was saying to him, my reaction as I was watching it was, oh God, this is not going to end well. Like this is like leaving aside, I didn't think it had any chance of success. Obviously, but I thought the ramifications of this over time are going to be very, very negative.
Yes,
and he asked me to elaborate, and I said I'll get to it. I never got to it, so let me just quickly elaborate. I spoke on our TV show on Planet America last week about the fact that I always have concern when people start throwing around the term domestic terrorism.
Yes, absolutely.
And what they're going to do with that.
Yep.
And Biden, I spoke at the time about how Biden has form, that he boasted about how much he influenced the Patriot Act back in 2001, and say it was based on, he said it was based on legislation he wrote in response to the Oklahoma bombing. And
which may or may not be true.
It may or may not be
the
true,
fact that he's boasting about it is the worrying thing.
Exactly. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is that if you designate, and this is something we're already talking about, and I'm sure we'll keep on talking about, whether you designate official acts of domestic terror, right?
Yes.
When you start doing that kind of thing, people go, well, what's the problem with that? In fact, we interviewed someone today, Elizabeth Newman, who was she worked for Trump until she quit. In protest about this very thing, and she was saying that she was on the fence a little bit, but she was hinting very heavily that she does think that you should have official domestic terror designations, because she said she doesn't think you should have lighter sentences for terrorism that's domestic than foreign.
Yes,
and less tools.
Yep.
But the thing is that if you create a domestic terror category, you then create a prohibition on providing material support to, invert commas, domestic terrorists.
Right. Yes.
And that becomes very broad.
Yes.
It can mean that if you have anything to do with these people, in any capacity, you are committing a crime potentially.
Yes.
Yeah, and that can be used by the police for all kinds of mischief potentially. And even imprisoned rehabilitation could be seen as assisting a terrorist. Yeah, so it's a dangerous area. It worries me. Another thing is that we've seen in the past when you fill prisons with right-wing extremists or extremists of any kind, you end up with groups like MS-13.
Yes.
Like it helps. It fosters them. And so you just got to be just careful. That's all I'm saying. I worry about this kind of stuff. I also think that there's a bit of legislation going around at the moment from Stephanie Murphy, which would prevent anyone who participated in the January protests and riot on Capitol Hill from being eligible for security clearance. You go, okay, fair enough. But she includes the protest, not just the riot, but the protest before it, even if they didn't go onto the Capitol Hill. She also includes anyone who participated in any Stop the Steal rally or anyone who knowingly engaged with QAnon. Now, you might think they're kooks. Well, they are kooks. But if you're denying a security clearance purely for attending a rally, that can be applied to left-wingers as well. That can be applied, and it would. It can be applied to anyone. And when you're talking about security clearance, that means they can't join the army. That means they can't have a whole bunch of public service jobs. Like it's a real penalty. You know? And we've got Chuck Schumer. Did you see that stupid little thing he was waving around when he was talking about no-fly lists? He was talking about, he had this little poster of a plane with like a Ghostbusters cross-out thing. That was his little prop to indicate the no-fly list. He was saying everyone should be on the no-fly list. He was associated. I
can see my general policy of avoiding Chuck Schumer over the summer.
Hand to God, I'll send you a link. You got to put that up. It's beautiful. You've got people talking about, you've got 9 states have already passed 14 anti-protest laws since January 6. All now, do you think those anti-protest laws are going to be used for QAnon? I don't think so. So anyway, it's a nice excuse to curtail civil liberties. This is the kind of thing that I worry about. Do you have any thoughts about this or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to mean that Congress becomes a much less public place, which is a real pity. It was actually a highly accessible place where people could go and, you know, if they were in Washington, they could go and talk to their representatives. I think that era is probably gone, which is a pity. You know, it really was, in some sense, the people's house. And I think it's not. I think it's going to be very, very heavily securitized as a result. I will say, though, a really underrated factor in why it wasn't worse, gun control.
In Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were very few people carrying guns in that riot. But what percentage of those people do you think own guns? It's probably
that's
fairly high percentage.
And given the number of assaults that took place using flags, you can only imagine how many would have involved guns if they had them.
And when people say, oh, well, the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, and there's all this discourse about, oh, well, gun control just can't work. Actually, it did. Like, it's clear the gun control that was in place, especially given the number of people who were flying in to DC, was actually a deterrent to them bringing their guns in, which could have made that situation much, much worse. Because they actually asked, a lot of people were asked by reporters why they didn't have guns, and they talked about, because of DC's restrictive laws.
Good call.
Yeah, I mean... So it was, because the whole thing, it was this very weird mix of completely contemptuous of the law and weirdly law-abiding at the same time.
Yes.
Staying
within the velvet rope. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So, and gun control was one of the things that actually held up.
My two favourite things, just quickly, is number one, the way these people are all on Facebook, right? That's how they meet, right? And so one of the funny things that was coming out when people were going through everyone else's Facebook page, these writers' Facebook pages, was how Facebook creates these dinky little cheesy anniversaries of all your friends and all the good times you've had.
Yeah.
People were putting up videos of the good times that these insurrectionists had over the last year or so. Like, there's one here. Literally.
Thanks for being part of the community.
Literally every single photo is him and his pals with massive guns. The 3 means 3%er.
Yeah.
Like, they're talking this militia. And thanks. And it's interspersed with pictures of various multicultural people celebrating with fireworks.
So wholesome.
It's just very funny. The other thing which I loved was... Sorry, did you jump in?
I was going to say, I like the stories of people going on Tinder and doing honey traps. I'm looking for a conservative. And then getting people sending photos of themselves participating in the insurrection.
Very clever. The other thing I love was in the immediate aftermath of the metal detectors in Congress.
Yes.
The squealing going on from conservatives who, until then, had been absolutely gung-ho about getting school kids to use metal detectors. Right? They're all about that.
Yeah.
And again, other people who go through metal detectors, and just the idea of them going through metal detectors just made them go crazy. Like Debbie Lesko, I love this quote. For members of Congress to enter the floor of the US House, we now have to go through intense security measures on top of the security we already go through. These new provisions include searches and being wandered like criminals. We now live in Pelosi's communist America.
Oh, Pelosi's communist America.
It was so good. Anyway, do you have anything else to say about insurrection before we move on? Just because I did cover it a lot last week on Wednesday.
Yeah, no.
No, okay. Very quickly, the first of the year, Stats Nugget. Okay. Some have suggested, this is from Rasmussen, some have suggested that the red states and blue states should split into separate countries. Would you favour or oppose splitting the red states and blue states into separate countries? 25% of American voters said they favoured that proposal.
Really?
Wait for it. 40% of those who attend church more than once a week support the move, compared to 18% who never go to church. 43% of evangelicals supported the two-country plan. Self-described MAGA nation people. Imagine that's how you describe yourself. MAGA nation. 52% approved the two-country plan. 52% of MAGA nation.
Well, that's great.
Like their own nation. They can call the red state nation MAGA nation.
Yes, and their national anthem should be the song from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, except changed slightly from a land of pure imagination to a land of pure imagination.
Very good. You would think we'd said that beforehand, but we didn't.
No.
That's why he's an associate professor. That's very, very good. Okay. Do you... I don't want to talk about Trump forever, but yeah, this is your first hit of the year.
Yeah.
Anything from the last month of Trump, like legacy, where he's going, how it ended. Do you have any thoughts about any of that or anything you want to talk about?
I mean, I've got a lot more thoughts about where the Republican Party is going, which I believe we're going to discuss.
We are going to talk
a little bit.
Yeah.
We're talking about.
Well, we can talk about that
we're
now.
So we're talking about Trump himself here. Trump,
all the Republicans. You can
Trump,
talk about the Republican Party.
the man.
Yes. Yeah. Like it's. Yeah. I mean, I want to start with Trump the man. But
Well, okay. First of all, let's talk about the social media ban.
Yeah.
It's working.
It is definitely working.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is having the intended effect. There's actually a lot of analogous arguments around gun control and restrictions on free speech. People claim, it can never work. I was seeing predictions immediately. This is going to drive hundreds of thousands of people to Parler, which then immediately got deplatformed itself. Like, no, Twitter was a major focal point.
There are apparently a lot of people on Telegram because they can have groups of 200,000 people there.
Yeah.
Having said that, I don't think there's any indication it's as big as Twitter was.
No, it's not. And also, I mean, it's been pointed out, part of the power of Twitter was that the media would cover everything.
Yes.
That, I never followed Trump on Twitter, but I knew everything he said on Twitter because of the kind of coverage it got.
One of the stats I said on Wednesday was that I don't remember exactly. I think it was 62% of Trump tweets ended up in news stories.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so social media ban is working. I think there's a debate about whether it would have been feasible to ban him when he was the president. Without getting into that debate, I can understand why they didn't. But yeah, the social media ban is working and it's a good thing.
I'll tell you what I found interesting, though, about that was that Trump kind of gave up after the social media ban. And that... I thought that was really interesting in that I actually think that is what hurt him more than anything because his mythology is he fights, he always fights. And all of a sudden he didn't fight. All of a sudden Mike Pence was president, doing stuff. He was nowhere.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he's still the president. He could hold press conferences if he wanted to.
This is why Enrique Tarrio, the leader of the Proud Boys, said basically, we're finished with Trump.
Yeah.
We want a real leader. We want a real fighter.
Yeah, and in particular, I thought the fact that he didn't go to inauguration made him seem particularly weak. Because, I think that, I don't think anyone wanted him at the inauguration.
No.
But just in terms of, from the perspective of his followers, the fact that he just gave up and he had that pathetic ceremony.
Have a nice life.
Yeah, I really think it did pierce the mythology. I mean, he's obviously on the way back now. But in terms of, you look at the polls, it's pretty clear that, as always happens with Trump, when he disappears for a while, people start to think more fondly, less unfondly. I think that hurt him a lot personally. And you look at the ratings on Fox. I feel like this is all connected. There's a general sense of deflation. I know there's always deflation when you lose elections.
Yeah.
But I think there's even more of a sense of deflation amongst the MAGA heads because of just how pathetically Trump dealt with it.
Right, yes, and especially as they'd been feeding on prophecies for years about there is going to be this great cataclysm. And even after losing the election, they always thought that the moment when the crackdown on their enemies happened was just around the corner. A lot of them thought it was going to happen on Inauguration Day, and then for nothing to happen. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, just to pad out what I was just saying about the Fox's ratings, I should actually just give you numbers. From Election Day through to Inauguration Day, CNN was the most watched cable news network through the day, both total viewers and in the key demographic 25 to 54. They averaged 1.8 million during the day. MSNBC averaged 1.6 million. Fox was third with 1.5 million. CNN was number one amongst the key demographic in prime time, but Fox was still number one overall in prime time.
Right.
But still, that's given that Fox, for large proportions of the last 4 years, was sometimes 3 times higher than MSNBC and CNN. That's quite a turnaround.
Absolutely.
And, another bit of evidence that the Conservatives are deflated. I read a quote the other day from about the Conservative Union, their CPAC, their conference they're organising at the moment. And Matt Schlapp was asked about, the leader was asked about how he felt it was going. And he said, this is a quote, Matt Schlapp said he is convinced this year's conference will be no different from past years. CPAC is going great, he told Politico on Tuesday. before then saying that his quote needed to be attributed without his name.
Always a sign that things are going great.
Good on them for saying that as well in the article. I thought that was
yeah.
wonderful. QAnon's interesting. Do you reckon they're done, or do you think they're just going to?
No, I don't think they're done. So I think they are.
Because there's a lot of panic going on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, going back to something that I talked about nearly a year ago now, which is the classic study When Prophecy Fails by Leon Festinger and his co-authors. This is a bad failure of prophecy. They are going to lose a lot of people, but the ones that they keep are going to be more tightly wedded to the fantasy than ever, right? Because they're even more emotionally invested in it. And these things, they always have a way of adapting, right? So, okay, it turns out that we were wrong to think that it was going to be Trump who would lead this crackdown as president. Clearly, the crackdown is coming later. Maybe we need to have a few years of Biden or something to bring them all out into the open. There is always this thing about, it needs to get worse. So, no, there are elements of QAnon that are going to stick around. There are large elements of QAnon that are going to be sticking around. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene hasn't gone anywhere. She hasn't given up on this shit. It's not that a lot of, yes, they're going to lose a lot of people, but they're going to keep a lot of people as well. And they will evolve into new forms that will get new people. So no, even if its original form is dead, like apparently the original Q poster, basically, not the original Q poster, but one of the original.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Ron Watkins.
Yes, Ron Watkins had this post saying, we all made a lot of friends along the way.
I got the quote. As we enter into the next administration, please remember all the friends and happy memories we made together over the past few years.
Yeah, which is what you really want to hear when you've dedicated yourself to a cult that says that there's going to be a global crackdown on a satanic pedophile cabal.
When I read that, I was imagining Doogie Howser typing into his laptop at the end of an episode with a ding.
And then it finishes with, do not attribute that to me.
That's right. Yeah. I did say, it was funny, in the same article that when they were talking about that, I saw that a few QAnons tried out the theory that maybe Trump handed over the pedophile beat to Joe Biden. And then a lot of people just said, "Oh, come on!" Like that was too far even for QAnon. Like, come on, seriously.
Actually, Biden's leading it. Yeah.
I did see one theory going around, a new theory, which was that I don't think too many people are going to subscribe to this one, but who knows?
Yep.
That there's a law enacted in 1871 that secretly turned America into a corporation and destroyed the original American government of the Founding Fathers. But that Trump will be sworn in on March the 4th as the president of the original republic, not the corporation that the 1871 Act created. And that will be the end of the corporation.
Is magnificent. Like, I respect the brain that comes up with something like that. I don't know if I want to have a conversation with that person, but on some level I respect them.
Sure. In all seriousness, I'm just speculating wildly here, as I do sometimes, that I was looking for things that could potentially be the beginning of the next conspiracy.
Yes.
Just like at the moment, I'm looking for the beginnings of the next Tea Party.
Right.
And I have a theory about that, by the way, that the beginnings of the next Tea Party is going to be, we'll get to, in a future episode, we'll get to COVID.
Yep.
I reckon schools opening might be the beginnings of the next Tea Party, but we'll get there. I was thinking maybe the next conspiracy site could be the federal vaccine centres.
Yeah.
That Biden's opening.
Already there.
Because they're opening 100 vaccine centres.
They're already there.
And it's like, they're going to inject you with microchips.
Vaccines have been such a magnet for conspiracy theories.
But particularly these are federal vaccine centres. They're going to be run by the military.
Oh, yeah.
So they've got all the components. In fact, DeSantis, who, by the way...
Yeah.
I talked to him about hauling cotton the other day. I reckon DeSantis might be dark horse competition for hauling cotton.
Yes, could be.
Anyway, DeSantis, I noticed, was calling the vaccine centres FEMA camps.
Yeah. By the way, it's
Here we
easy.
go.
It's always easy to forget, right? When you look at the George W. Bush era or the Trump era, both eras of basically military worship on the right, as well as police worship, especially in the Trump era. You forget that when they're out of power, they tend to be very anti-authoritarian, quite anti-military in a lot of cases.
We're going to remember now.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you brought up Marjorie Taylor Greene. Let's talk about Republicans and that kind of stuff. Let's just go through Marjorie Taylor Greene's rap sheet, because it's been added to quite a lot in the last couple of days.
Yes.
She thought that Sandy Hook shooters were actors. Mm-hmm. She thought that the 28 Parkland shooting was a false flag operation.
Yes.
In January 2019, she liked a comment that said, quote, "a bullet to the head would be quicker to remove Nancy Pelosi." In other posts, she liked comments about executing FBI agents. She'd commented agreeably about the frazzle drip conspiracy theory. For those who don't know that one, that's that Hillary Clinton, Huma Abedin, her aide, sexually assaulted a girl, filleted her face, wore her face like a mask, and then drank her blood as part of a satanic ritual to ingest adrenochrome, of course. That's basically the wrap. Now, to be fair to Marjorie Taylor Greene, most of these involve her liking things or saying yes. It's not her like typing out 3,000 word manifestos.
Right.
It's like she's buzzing around the edges of it rather than plunging right into the middle. To be fair, the quote from Marjorie Taylor Greene when asked about these is, "They're coming at me because I'm a threat to their goal of socialism." That's the quote. Kevin McCarthy's spokesperson, quote, this is classic Kevin McCarthy.
Yeah.
"These comments are deeply disturbing, and Leader McCarthy plans to have a conversation with the Congresswoman about them." That will show her. She's going to have to talk to Kevin McCarthy. Anyway, what do you think about Marjorie Taylor Greene?
She's the future of the party.
She's
the future of a large part of the party. I mean,
do you think it's going to be 100 of her in 10 years' time, do you?
Could be. Yeah. Look, I mean, she's worked out that, so you've got all of these senators, mainly the Cruzes and Hawleys and Cottons, who think that the path to power is creating a more intellectually coherent, respectable version of nationalist populism. No, it's not. It's accentuating the crazy. She is far more likely to gather widespread popular support than they are, because she goes for the same kind of stuff that Trump did. To be fair to them, and I'm not often fair to them, but to be fair to the Cruzes and the Hawleys and so forth, I'm not sure they're saying the path to power is intellectually coherent populism. I think they are just intellectually coherent people. And so when they're just trying to do populism, and that's the way they do it, because that's what they're like. Whereas Marjorie Taylor Greene is a moron. so whatever she does has no intellectual coherence. Like, I think they're just being themselves. Yeah, you could be right, yes.
Like, that they're the two different kinds of populism.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. Which one's going to work?
Yes.
Do you think she should be, should someone be expelled for I mean, they're not going to expel her, but should someone be expelled for likes?
I haven't looked enough into expulsion as a mechanism. When was the last time it was even used? It would have been after the Civil War.
Oh, no, it's happened a lot more recently than that.
Really?
There's been corrupt people expelled in the 90s.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. There was a trafficant.
Oh, yes.
Trafficant was expelled.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been a couple. I mean, they usually commit crimes.
Right.
Or super corrupt.
Yeah, look, if that's what expulsion is used for, then that's what it should be used for, not likes. I mean, you can't get away from the fact that she was democratically elected.
Yeah. And democratically elected when everyone knew what she was like.
Yes.
As well. They voted for that.
It's like that's the illness there, that there are people prepared to elect her. You don't deal with that through expulsions. That is not going to do anything about the problem. So, no, I don't believe in expulsion, but I think she has to be taken seriously in the sense of she knows that there is a large constituency for this shit out there, much larger than anything that Hawley or Cruz or Cotton command. And at the moment, it's all, especially in the wake of the Capitol riot, it's all very disreputable, and other members of Congress are keeping arm's length from it. But if it comes down to making a choice between Trump's supporters and respectability, they're going to go with Trump's supporters.
Well, they have no choice, otherwise they'll get primaried. I mean, you look at those censure motions going on. There's the Arizona one with Cindy McCain, which I did promise I'd come back to, and I've got the quote here. This is literally the quote of why Cindy McCain. It was one line long. This is why Cindy McCain was censured by the Arizona Republican Party. Cindy McCain has condemned President Trump for his criticism of her husband and erroneously placed behaviors over actual presidential results. That's literally the entirety of why she was censured by the Republican Party.
One of the
Party
things
in
that's
Arizona.
amazing about the Trump era is, Republicans are often characterized by honor culture, especially since they became a regionally southern culture. It's that classic honor culture of, you insult me or my family, I've got no choice but to fuck you up. Okay, and this is widely seen as a kind of positive thing. It's celebrated as Jacksonian culture by people like Walter Russell Mead. Trump was often, with varying degrees of accuracy, referred to as a Jacksonian. But the fact is, Trump has shown that honor culture is dead, especially in politics. You get people like Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio. Trump insults them, insults their families, insults their wives, gets people to make threats against their wives, and they respond by becoming loyal courtiers.
Yes, that's true.
It's absolutely pathetic. And yes, so she's defending the memory of her deceased husband.
No, they
and for the
censure her for
Republican
that.
Party, how dare you be mean to Mr. Trump? And they're doing all of this for the most prissy, emotional, fragile piece of shit. It's so actually counter to traditional American notions of manhood. I'm not carrying water for sort of traditional patriarchal honor culture, but this even makes me feel a little bit ill.
I miss seeing you screw up your face like that.
Yeah.
You get
Just quickly
contempt.
on expulsions,
Yeah.
there's been 2 since post-Civil War.
Oh.
Michael Myers,
Yeah.
Pennsylvania Democrat, was kicked out after taking
Also
money.
killing a bunch of kids
I
on
was gonna
Halloween.
Exactly,
say, the
yes.
hockey mask.
He also,
Yeah.
after he killed
That's
all
a
those
no-no,
kids,
yeah.
he took money from undercover FBI agents and James Trifficker.
Yeah, traffic cone.
Yeah,
traffic cone.
There we go. Yeah. Thank you very much, Hand of God.
Yes.
By the way, we can't mention these resolutions without also mentioning the Oregon Republican Party resolution, which I
yes.
will also quote.
Yeah.
History tells us that after George Washington appointed
History
Major
tells us.
General Benedict Arnold to command West Point, Arnold conspired to surrender the fort to the British. The 10 Republican House members, by voting to impeach President Trump, repeated history by conspiring to surrender our nation to leftist forces seeking to establish a dictatorship void of all cherished freedoms and liberties. The actual transcript of President Trump's speech contradicts Democrat claims of incitement of insurrection. There is growing evidence that the violence at the Capitol was a false flag operation designed to discredit President Trump, his supporters, and all conservative Republicans. This provided the sham motivation to impeach President Trump in order to advance the Democrat goal of seizing total power, in a frightening parallel to the February 1933 burning of the German Reichstag. That's a resolution they passed.
That's a resolution. So Oregon, of course, was another place where the state house got occupied by lunatics, and camera footage showed it was an Oregon Republican legislator who let them in. Yeah, or the Oregon Republican Party is just one of the very worst.
A lot of frightening parallels there.
A lot of frightening parallels.
You got
okay, so
anything to say about Republicans?
yes,
and
I do.
Trump? Yeah, keep
I
going.
do
Go
have
for it. Jump in
some
there.
things to say.
Yeah.
There's an essay that I'm going to recommend. It
Ooh,
is by
yes.
Daniel Schlossman and Sam Rosenfeld. I emailed you the link
Yes,
this
it
afternoon.
will be
so
onto the list.
We can put that up. It is called The Long New Right and the World They Made.
Please look in for the reading materials, which this is. Have a look in the blurb, which is, if you're watching on YouTube, just click on the information. It will be in there. If you're watching on Facebook, click on the information to expand, and it will be in there. I don't know how to include that on the audio podcast.
Now, this is a long essay. It's 78 pages. It's like reading a little book, but I highly recommend it. Even though it's written by a couple of academics, it's not written in a terribly academic style. I think it's quite accessible, and it's really looking at 50 years of Republican Party history. Now, it's written in 2018, but very, very resonant now when there's a lot of discussion about, why can't the Republican Party police these extremists? Okay, now, going back to that earlier thing about the dynamics of coups, and it's often highly contingent, there's this moment of uncertainty, who's going to join what side. even though that was never the case for the military, it actually was the case for congressional Republicans in the immediate aftermath of the Capitol riot.
Yeah.
There actually was a moment where even Mitch McConnell is saying, we need to purge Trump. Apparently, this is what he was saying, and maybe impeachment's the way to do it. And there was this moment of uncertainty where it is conceivable that senators at least could have actually gone the other way. It is very clear by now that moment has passed, right?
Very clear.
Yeah, it's clear. The uncertainty disappeared very quickly about what side the vast majority of Republicans were on.
Can I give you the evidence of how it's disappeared?
Yes.
This is the evidence.
Yep.
Straight after the riot,
Yes.
Kevin McCarthy,
Yes.
leader of the
Right,
House,
yeah.
of House Republicans, says
Yeah.
the president bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on Congress by mob rioters.
Yeah.
He should have immediately denounced the mob when he saw what was unfolding. A few weeks later, he says, I don't believe he provoked, if you listen to what he said at the rally. And now he says, I also think everybody across this country has some responsibility.
Right, yes. Okay. So this is a
indication.
classic picture that we get of Republicans not policing extremism. This is not because they can't. It's not like Republicans are incapable of in-group policing.
Stephen King.
Because, well, yes, so they
Yeah.
were able to deal with Stephen King when he became too much of an embarrassment. But the other thing is they do in-group policing all the time against people who are insufficiently loyal
Yes.
to Trump.
Or defend their husband.
Yes. I
Yes.
mean, the Republican Party at the moment, they are showing the left how cancel culture is done. Okay, so the Republicans can do in-group policing, but they're not policing extremists. And there's a lot of a lot of anguish about this from various fantasists, mainly working at the Washington Post and New York Times and similar places, fantasizing about some kind of return to Republican normality. Well, okay, this essay gives you a good idea of why that's the case, and that is, for the last 50 years, there has been considerable interpenetration between the mainstream and extremism. Extremism has been welcomed into the Republican Party because it is a source of strength, not a source of weakness. Okay, it is a source of energy. It's a source of organization. It's a source of money in a lot of cases. And Republicans have always stood to lose more by trying to shut extremists out than by actually letting them in. Now, throughout history, there have been a lot of overrated claims about conservative in-group policing. And the classic one of these is, well, William F. Buckley, when he was the editor of National Review, he, drove the Birches out of the movement. No, he did not. He personally attacked Robert Welch, who was the founder of the John Birch Society. It's a Midwestern candy manufacturer, who thought that Eisenhower was a communist. Right now, it was clear he was attacking. I think it was after the Eisenhower is a communist thing that William F. Buckley decided he'd had enough. Although, notably, William Rusher, the owner of National Review, didn't want him to attack Welch, but he went on the attack against Welch. Now, why was he doing that? Because Welch was an embarrassment, right? Okay, same reason why they went after Steve King, because he was an They will go after the embarrassments, but it's always in a very individualized way. They don't go after the overall supporters. So there was actually no purge of Birches from the Republican Party. This essay shows actually how ingrained the Birches were in the Republican Party. There's been some speculation about, okay, so this election was surprisingly close in the end. If it had been the kind of repudiation that some of the opinion polls were expecting, would that have actually been the moment where the fever broke and the Republican Party decided, okay, we've got to get rid of Trump? The 1964 election would suggest not, where Barry Goldwater, who was the first really right-wing Republican candidate, in many ways the dawn of the modern era, he lost all but, I think, 6 states, 5 in the Deep South, and his home state of Arizona. There was 4 in the Deep South and Arizona. And what was the result of that in the long term? It was the ascendancy of his faction within the Republican Party. We should learn this lesson. It's not election losses that actually cause Republicans to to part ways with, with former paths that they've been on. Democrats maybe are more likely to go down that path. Republicans not. And, the fact that Trump lost the election, the fact that he's the first president since Herbert Hoover to preside over the loss of the White House, the House of Representatives, and the Senate all in one go, the fact that Joe Biden has got the highest share of the vote against an incumbent president since 1932. None of that matters because it is very clear that the majority of Republicans at this point are Trumpists. And the Republican Party knows that it has got nothing to gain from trying to weed out the extremists, and it has a lot to lose from trying to weed out the extremists.
Let me just add into that, by the way. I mean, I completely agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
But let me add, there's a special aspect to Trump as well, which adds to the hazard, which is, actually, I'll just read the quote. This is from, I'm going to put up some pieces in the homework as well of some legacy items, which I thought were interesting about Trump. And this is a quote from one of them, which I thought was very clever, from Jonathan Bernstein. Parties risk much by nominating someone they cannot trust. In some ways, Republicans were lucky with Trump. He was willing in almost every instance to go along with what they wanted, notably by ceding control of judicial nominations. But even a weak president has some influence, and Trump used his to build up the most radical wing of the party at the expense of its conservative mainstream. Trump's power within the party had little to do with how popular he was with Republican voters. It derived, and still derives, from the plain fact that everyone knows he has no significant loyalty to the party and wouldn't think twice about harming it. Thus, to pick the most recent major example, Trump was able to hold most of the party hostage to his false claims of election fraud because it was plausible that he would tell his strongest supporters in Georgia to stay home on the day of special Senate elections earlier this month and deliver the Senate majority Democrats, something that no other modern president would ever have done.
Yes.
And I think that's a special aspect of Trump, that he has that, I will destroy you if you fuck with me.
And all he had to do to kill off any talk of impeachment among Republicans was to say, I'm going to start to put it out there. I'm thinking about starting a third party called the Patriot Party. Because as you said, it would be suicidal, but yes, he would do it. He's got no loyalty to the party. And by the way, on that point about holding the party hostage to the election fraud claims, I think that Mitch McConnell got far too much credit for, in the end, actually appearing to acknowledge that Biden had won the election. Did you notice what he actually said about Biden winning the election? He said the Electoral College has spoken. Right, phrasing it as if it's this bunch of elites have decided, framing it as if it was a decision of the Electoral College rather than a decision of the people. So even Mitch McConnell, who got all this undeserved credit for supposedly acknowledging that Biden won, didn't actually acknowledge that it was the will of the people that put Biden there. Didn't acknowledge that it was 81 million voters.
Yes, that's a good call. And even saying the Electoral College implies that there's a possibility that the numbers are wrong. Yeah. But it's just too late. Yeah. The umpire's spoken, so we move on.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. So, no, there are actually really very few Republicans who are still Republicans who acknowledged that Trump actually lost the election. And, that idea of the election was stolen is going to be an article of faith among influential Republicans for a very long time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, this is not to say that Trump is going to be all-powerful forever. These things have a way of being unpredictable. We don't know what factors could diminish Trump's influence over time, not least him dying, which it's going to be very interesting to see what happens when he dies. Who's going to claim the kind of fights over who's going to claim the true mantle of Trumpism are going to be very, very chaotic. But that's probably still a way off.
Yeah. Unless you have something else to say about Trumps and Republicans, I'm conscious of time, so I'd like to move on.
Okay, let us move on.
I know you wanted to bring up GameStop.
Yes.
Now, this is a story which I must admit I know about, but I haven't read much about because I thought I'm not going to talk about it on the show, so I kind of skipped it, but it does seem a lot of fun.
Yes.
So tell us all about it.
Yes. So what's happening with this is GameStop is it's a video game retailer that used to be a staple of suburban malls in America. So obviously business is hurting very, very badly at the moment. Business for all bricks and mortar retail is hurting badly, but especially for video games, which are now almost entirely bought online. So some hedge funds were betting on GameStop stock dropping heavily and had major short positions. Now, what this means for those of you unfamiliar with it, when you're shorting the market is often done by these big institutional investors like hedge funds basically borrowing a lot of stock from someone else, selling it in making a bet that the stock is going to drop. Then when the price does drop, buying it back at a far lower price. So they've still got the stock, which they can then return to the owner, but they've made a huge profit. Okay, so fairly simple the way that works. It's generally, for that to work, you have to have a lot of capital behind you. One of the reasons you have to have a lot of capital behind you is because the stock price might not drop in the way that you expect initially. And if that's the case, then you're going to have to put up more and more collateral. And actually, in the end, you could end up incurring massive losses. Now, for some reason, on Reddit, this board that monitors Wall Street called Wall Street Bets, quite a few people knew about these short positions that two major hedge funds were taking. And apparently it's been going on for several months now. This coordinated action by small-time day traders coordinating across Reddit to actually drive up the stock of GameStop, apparently purely with the intention of fucking up these hedge funds. There may be some people who are trying to make money out of it, but it does seem that the overall intention is just debilitate these hedge funds.
Can I ask, just before you continue, does this shorting process, have any actual social benefit whatsoever?
No.
Is there any reason
No, this is one of the things that makes people actually wonder what is the point of the stock market, right? So theoretically, the stock market should be an efficient way of channeling investor capital towards enterprises that have a good chance of success, that investment will help to grow these businesses. That's the way that it should work. But because there are all of these instruments of betting and then betting on bets and betting on bets of bets of bets, there's actually a lot of stuff that happens on the stock market, which is people just trying to make a lot of money by being clever.
Okay, so this is completely guilt-free. This is great. Go on.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so this action, this raid has been described as nihilistic, driven more by just the sense of entertainment rather than by the profit motive, but it has certainly had an effect. So one of these hedge funds, Melvin, had to be bailed out to the tune of $2.75 billion by two rival funds, and they had to actually close out their short position. So they had to buy back all of this massively overpriced GameStop stock and then just get out of it altogether. So, and by the way, one of the reasons why this was happening was there's been this real resurgence in in day trading over the last year or so. So day trading had been on the way out a bit because so much trading is automated now and is algorithmic that it was very, very, very hard for day traders, just people trading on their own, to compete. But there's been this proliferation of new apps that have made it a lot easier, like Robinhood, which is the one that the Redditors were. Also, message boards, there's all of these new forms of coordination have developed. But also, since the pandemic, there's just a lot more people with a lot more time on their hands and also looking for ways to make money. So this has been, attacks like these have been going on for...
Then you throw the stimulus checks that everyone received as well, and it was just this perfect storm.
Perfect opportunity.
Yeah. So there was just a few days of this sort of almost utopian exuberance as the stock got driven up to these absolutely absurd levels. And also, at this point, a lot of people were making, at least on paper, huge amounts of money out of it.
But the thing about it is that they've made no money unless they give up the game.
Exactly. Okay, yeah. So this is it's got to end with a crash. Okay, it's got to end with a crash. The question is who is going to lose all of the money, right? So, and what has happened over the last 24 hours is that 3 of these day trading platforms, Robinhood, Ameritrade, and I can't remember the name of the other one, actually put a halt on trading. But meanwhile, large institutional investors were able to continue to trade. And so their original plan is now being carried out, which is the stock is dropping precipitously. So obviously, these Robinhood users are just howling blue murder about this. Like it's basically these apps actually collaborating with institutional Wall Street, actually effectively taking on the role of regulators who have not stepped in so far, because regulators are saying, well, we can't actually prove that this is a coordinated attack with the intent of subverting the market. Basically, these platforms have done their dirty work for them. And in a very weird moment, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, who'd been playing a certain role in, you might say, ginning up the crowd, said, look, this is a disgrace. Or just these ordinary day traders can't trade while hedge funds can continue to trade. Like, what the fuck? And she tweeted this, and Ted Cruz retweeted it saying, completely agree.
Wow.
Yeah. So...
that's the fourth sign of the apocalypse. that's
yeah,
incredible.
Totally. Now, so unfortunately, this is going to end in tears. Like, there does have to be a crash. It's being precipitated now. There will be people who decide now is time to get out, and as soon as that starts to happen, there will be a stampede for the exits.
These guys must know that's coming. Like
They
surely
do.
the logic is
They do.
The logic is we're going to have a good time along the way and hopefully bankrupt some dickheads.
Well, yes, yeah, and they did succeed in removing one major dickhead from the game, but that there has been this sense on these message boards that, guys, let's just keep it going. It's like we weren't in this to make money in the first place. We're in it to bankrupt dickheads, but unfortunately, their own platforms may have made that impossible, and so now there's a lot of people holding a lot of stock which is not going to be worth very much.
Well, thank you for explaining that to me, so I don't have to read. Let's get back into Biden now, because we've been talking enough about Trump. I haven't had. Just very briefly, we should just a few clips I haven't played on the show. Which maybe I did play this one.
Are there good reasons why you haven't played them on the show?
We just don't have enough time for everything, We're going
to get them now, aren't we?
We're going to get one now at least. This is my absolute favorite. I don't remember if I played this on the show or not, but this is my absolute favorite in terms of enthusiastic, media getting a little bit too excited about Joe Biden.
Dear.
This is my absolute favorite. From David Shallian on CNN.
I mean, those lights that are just shooting out from the Lincoln Memorial along the reflecting pool, it's like almost extensions of Joe Biden's arms embracing America.
Joe Biden's arms embracing America. Also from CNN. They've got some great form, those guys. You've got this, hang on. You got it's just a tweet, which I'll just bring up here, of fireworks. Mm-hmm. Just normal fireworks from the inauguration.
Yeah.
With the CNN guy saying, "This team truly understands optics. These images will inspire our friends and shake our foes."
Fireworks.
Fireworks. Fireworks.
Fireworks are going to shake your foes.
Apparently.
Who are they even talking about? China? You know what China's going to say? What a shitty bunch of fireworks.
I think their foes might be one of those tribes in Indonesia that hasn't seen civilization. I think that might be their foes who are shaken by fireworks. But anyway, he's got a honeymoon. He does have a honeymoon. You look at 538. They've got they've started.
I'm never looking at that side again.
Well, they were kind of right.
Chaz, you've already gone back to 538.
Well, what do you expect? You know me. They've already started their poll tracker for 2024. No, just in general. He's got a 53.9% approval rating at the moment and a 35.1% disapproval rating.
Astronomically high by American standards.
Yeah, well,
I'm deadly serious about that. Anything over 50%.
Trump ended with 38.6. That's how Trump ended. And that's actually comparable to W and Clinton and not Obama. Obama's higher.
Yeah.
But that's comparable. But where he's a bit down is because of the polarization in America. His net approval was only plus 18.9 points.
Yeah.
which sounds a lot, but Clinton had a plus 36 point
Yes.
spread. George W. had a plus 32 point. Obama had a plus 39 point. Trump had a plus 2 point spread. But yeah, anyways,
the high point of his career.
he's got a honeymoon. But I just want to flag a couple of things I've noticed already,
Yes.
which I think just for people who can watch and be amused like me. First of all, there's I'm enjoying the unity game, which is that the way the unity game works is Joe Biden mentioned unity during his inaugural, which is fair enough.
Yeah.
That's his thing. He
Yes.
likes that.
Yep.
And so now, basically, anytime he does anything, he gets a whole bunch of people going, "Oh, what happened to unity?" Like anytime he has any policy, signs any executive act, anything, someone's go, "Oh, unity! What about that?" It's and I just wanted to say, just for the record, unity doesn't mean policy where you only do what your opposition agrees with.
Wants you to do.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, unity is about presumably tone and style and unquestionables. Not questioning motives, perhaps, or being civil. That's what.
Well, not whipping up violence against the opposition is a good start. I mean, we've got an extremely low bar
Yes, that's
at
right.
the moment for what would count as unifying.
On that note, by the way,
Yes.
I do feel that that's true. I mean, you were joking there, but I do feel it's actually true. We do have a low bar now.
Yes.
And I think we should watch out for that. I think the first thing that we should all do is lift our bar, because I've already noticed a few times where Biden has exaggerated / lied / been a little bit dodgy, and people are going, "Oh, but come on, Trump," and you go, "Yeah, I know this, I get that." But how about we don't make Trump the bar for presidents from now on? How about we just forget he ever existed and try to hold presidents to a standard that they should be held to? That might be worth a try. Anyway, I'll just throw it out there.
Yeah.
Like I'm not stoning Joe Biden. He hasn't been that bad. I'm just saying that saying, "Oh, yeah, we'll give him 2,000 lies because Trump did 4,000."
Yeah.
That doesn't cut it for me personally.
One of the things I've noticed is just how many absurdly early pronouncements are being made. Like, I think I saw possibly on the same front page of the Washington Post in opinion pieces. I can't remember who, but headlines like, "Joe Biden is pushing a progressive agenda and it's working." Then another one, "Joe Biden is working with compromise and it's working." It's like, it's been a week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Let's give it time. Actually, just talking about time. I'm looking at the time, so we should get into impeachment quickly because we've got 20 minutes. So
Yes.
let's use it. Before we do though, Stats Nugget. It's a very quick one, just because of the time.
Yeah.
The total incarcerated population in America is now 1.8 million, which for those that fell from 2.1 million last year. That's for the first time since 2002 below 2 million. It was at 2.3 million in 2009. That was its peak.
Yes.
Just wanted to flag that because that's interesting. It's down 500,000, and that's partly because of COVID. Obviously, they released a lot of prisoners, but still, we should just note that's positive.
Yeah.
Not everything's shit. that's nice. Impeachment.
It's good.
Okay. All right. Now the way impeachment's going, obviously, so far, the impeachment trial. Sorry,
Yes,
let's not
yeah,
confuse because the number of people who confuse impeachments with the trial really pisses me off, especially politicians. Politicians should know the difference. But anyway, the trial, the way things are clearly going, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, is that Republicans are clearly desperate to not judge Trump on his merits.
Yes.
Because that gets them to an awful position where they're either alienating their base or they're alienating the people in the general election.
Yes.
One of the two, right? And so they're trying to avoid that by making it all about a basic procedural question, which is, can you hold a trial? How can you remove a president who's already left, essentially? And we should be clear about one thing before we forget this, because I think it's already been forgotten by the press,
Yes.
that this is only being held after Trump left office because Mitch McConnell refused to let it be held while
Absolutely,
he was holding
yes.
office.
Yes.
They had a week and a half to hold. Now, they're talking about a 3-day trial at the moment.
Yes.
So, potentially.
Yeah, yeah.
So they could have held their 3-day trial while
Yes.
Trump was still there, but Mitch McConnell chose not to. So I don't want to hear him or any Republicans or anyone for that matter complaining
Hear that, Mitch?
about that.
Chaz doesn't want to hear it from you.
You're under notice, Mitch McConnell. That would be very cynical, Mitch McConnell. Anyway, so that's
Sir.
so that's the first thing. That's the first thing I want to put out there. The second thing I want to put out there
Yes.
is that we're already hearing a lot of crap about Roberts not presiding, Chief Justice Roberts not presiding over the impeachment.
Yeah.
The reason he's not presiding over the impeachment is because he doesn't have to, and why would he want to?
Yeah.
He doesn't have to because it's not the sitting president anymore. The whole concept is that there's a massive conflict of interest if you get, say, the vice president presiding over a trial
Yes.
of the president.
Yeah.
And so that's why Chief Justice. But now he doesn't have to, and I don't blame him for not wanting to be involved.
Yes.
But Rand Paul said, quote, if Justice Roberts is not presiding over this, then it is not impeachment. This charade will be nothing more than bitter partisanship and political theatre. No, they're following the Constitution. So, yeah. I mean, like I said on the show, I agree. It looks terrible. When
Rand Paul, there's another half man.
Oh, man, he's had a bad few weeks.
Oh, quarter man.
Anyway.
Well, he was just relentlessly mocked and emasculated by Trump in the primaries. And yet another one who
Yeah, he was
decided that
call him Mr. 0%, I
the
believe.
path back to redemption was by wedging himself as far up Trump as he could.
Well, he's very popular amongst his base.
Yes.
But we should just very briefly just actually deal with that question about can you sack an ex-president?
Yeah.
And look, there is history, which is like there's two elements in particular. There's no direct analogy. And this would have to go to the Supreme Court for sure if he was ever actually removed.
Yeah.
So who knows how they would rule. But in 1876, the Secretary of War, William Belknap, great name. Belknap?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. He resigned to avoid being impeached for a corruption scandal, but then they impeached him anyway after he resigned, and then they held the trial, and a big factor of that was them having the same argument. Can you sack the ex-Secretary of War?
And what did they say?
They said yes, you can. But having said that, while the majority of both houses said you can, enough of those who said you couldn't voted against his removal to mean he didn't get removed.
Right.
So it's actually a direct analogy to what's probably about to happen.
Yes.
Because the Senate just now also said, yes, we can hold a trial.
Yeah.
But a lot of those 45 are now going to vote against removing him for exactly that reason.
Yes.
But you can, according to the Senate in 1876. Also in 1862, a judge, West Humphreys, left his judgeship to join the Confederacy. So he left his job. A year afterwards, he was impeached and then removed. So it happened for a judge.
There you go.
So theoretically,
people.
you can. And I should also say there was an impeachment going on when the founding fathers were writing this crap in the Constitution.
We're writing this crap.
That's probably not as complimentary as they should be. Not very respectful.
When the founding fathers were writing this crap.
There was an impeachment going on in England at the time. Of a guy called Warren Hastings, who was a former Governor General of India. He'd left his office 2 years before his impeachment.
Yes.
And it was repeatedly referenced during the Constitutional Convention while they were writing this particular article.
Right, yes.
So they were super aware of the possibility, and they clearly chose to not address it to eliminate that kind of impeachment, which they probably would have if they wanted to.
Yes.
So just flag that. I should also note that this whole line of argument is, if we're being fair dinkum, is bullshit because I don't know about you, but I've spent the last 4 years listening to Republicans talking about potentially impeaching Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama.
Yes.
Including Matt Gaetz, and I played today, Trump himself talked about impeaching Obama in 2020.
Yeah.
So he thinks you can impeach people after they're president as well.
There you go.
So anyway, before we move on, Rand Paul.
Yes.
Did you see in his resolution? This got me going. Such bad faith projection.
Yeah.
Again, and anyway, Democrats. I've got the quote here. Democrats are about to do something no self-respecting senator has ever stooped to. Democrats are insisting the election is actually not over. And so they insist on regurgitating the bitterness of the election. How much cheek does he have? That's such a troll. That is such a troll move.
Yeah.
Oh, the Democrats haven't accepted the election result yet. Come on, mate. Like, seriously. Anyway.
Yeah, the best way is just not to respond,
Yeah,
Chaz.
okay. I will not respond. Okay, so but some serious defenses that people are offering.
Yes.
Jump in whenever you want, by the way. I'm just going through my notes here.
Yep.
First of all, there's an obvious defense, which is all the election questioning was the truth. Yeah, it was Hugo Chavez was holding the knife in the drawing room.
Yes. I think that one will be shot down by the number of people that Dominion is forcing apologies
I know, it's so good.
out of.
Yeah,
Which is amazing. So they're suing Rudy Giuliani for $2 billion.
$1.3 billion, I believe.
It's probably 2 billion Australian.
Yeah, fair enough. I just want to get it right because
Yes.
he's going to be paying that money.
Yes.
Let me tell you now.
Yeah, he's
so
fucked.
It's important to Rudy Giuliani. that we get the
And
right
in the
number.
meantime, all of these right-wing outlets have been forced to have these grovelling apologies
yeah.
that Dominion wrote for them.
Yeah, Newsmax
Yes.
giving an apology.
Yeah,
I like that
the
one.
American Thinker was my favourite. Yeah. Yes.
And another defence that I'm hoping that gets used. I mean,
Yes.
Scott Adams, the
Yeah.
Dilbert guy, was saying that
Dilbert guy.
saying they just handed him the thing he wanted most: a national platform to put election integrity on trial. The Senate will be like the Scopes trial. That's the evolution one.
For those of you unfamiliar with the Scopes trial, so this was the famous case where there was a high school teacher in Tennessee who'd been recruited by the ACLU to deliberately go and teach evolution in a school board where it was banned in order so that they could have this trial that would effectively be evolution on trial. And even though it was the school board that actually won that case, the court said they had the right to ban the teaching of evolution. It was viewed as a long-term loss.
Yeah. Another defense I think is going to be used, I'm expecting to hear this,
Yes, yeah.
is that Trump was just using his free speech. Trump was just saying his opinions. He was saying what he was thinking.
Saying his opinions.
He was just calling it like it is. He was
Yeah.
just saying what he thinks. Even if he's wrong, even if he's an idiot,
Yeah.
even if, whatever. It's what's wrong with Trump
Yeah.
saying in good faith that he thinks the election was rigged. If he thinks the election was rigged, First Amendment. And my response to that is that, I'm sorry, the president doesn't have free speech like that.
Yeah.
And you might go, hang on.
Yeah.
The parallel I would draw is a judge.
Yes.
If a judge just starts shooting his mouth off and saying, "I think you're
Yeah.
guilty. I think that Hugo Chavez is responsible before they even hear anything," they get disbarred immediately.
That's true.
And it's because when you hold certain public
Yes.
responsibilities, you don't have free speech
Exactly.
to contradict those responsibilities.
Exactly. So the linguistic philosopher J.L. Austin pointed this out. Words can be actions. And if you're the president of the United States, all of your words are potentially actions. Certainly if you're a public official, a lot of your words are actions. And as I've said before many times on this podcast, words are weapons. And I don't think that free speech really comes into it. Do you
They're
think
going to say that, though, for sure.
Do you think anyone is going to use the defense that has been used in court for, I don't know if it was for both Hannity and Carlson, but it was certainly used for Carlson, saying, oh, well, they're not supposed to be taken seriously?
Oh, the not seriously, literally thing.
Yes, yeah. So this was used for Carlson. I think it was in a defamation case. So, well, it's part of his brand. He engages in hyperbole. He's an entertainer.
They might try that.
Could that be used with evidence? Yeah, because evidence for that could be, Trump says, "Now I'm going to walk with you down Pennsylvania Avenue. I love Pennsylvania Avenue," and then he just doesn't.
Yeah.
Because obvious couple of reasons. First, he's a coward. Second, he hates walking anywhere.
Definitely.
But third, and most importantly,
He had TV to watch as well.
yeah, he's his mentor is a mafia lawyer who taught him, among other things, how to actually always remove himself from the scene of the crime and remove his fingerprints from it. So, I don't. Could that be a defense?
Potentially.
It was,
They're going to try a lot
he
of
wasn't
stuff.
supposed to be taken seriously here. Yeah.
Look, I mean, once again, I think the fact you're president kind of works against that. I think you're meant to take the president seriously. But God knows. Personally, I think the thing they're most likely, they're already saying this, is they're going to focus as much as possible on the speech and make it about the speech.
Yes.
Because the Democrats, for reasons I don't understand, made that prominent in the article when they could have talked about all kinds of stuff. I personally thought the phone call to the Georgia Secretary of State
that was
the dodgiest thing by a long way.
Yes,
I mean, they mentioned that in the article impeachment, but their emphasis was the speech directly before the insurrection, the incitement, they say. And and the Republicans are already just teeing that up, and they're just quoting over and over and over again.
Yeah.
You'll hear this quote at least 100 times during the trial. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Peacefully and patriotically. Like they're going to say, he wasn't inciting anyone. He said peacefully and patriotically, etc. And they're going to say that you can't draw a direct connection between his speech and the insurrection, because people were at the insurrection without even going to the speech. People turned up in merchandise. They turned up with their T-shirts saying Civil War MAGA and stuff. Like it was clearly not a speech that incited these people. Now, my response to that is, yes, it was the 2 months before that incited those people. But
the Trump era has really been just the golden age of context-free snippets of exonerating speech.
Yeah, that's a wonderful quote. That's a wonderful quote. And by the way, Andy McCarthy, who is a lawyer, worked for the Justice Department under George Bush. Yeah. Very, very conservative person.
Yes.
He's a Fox News lawyer. Very, very conservative. His view is that Trump should be impeached, but they should have completely worded the article differently.
Oh, they should have,
Yeah, and he says it should have been subversion of the Constitution's electoral process, particularly the 12th Amendment counting of the sovereign states' electoral votes, recklessly encouraging a raucous political demonstration that foreseeably devolved into a violent storming of the seat of our government, and depraved indifference to the welfare of the Vice President, Congress, security personnel, and other Americans who were in and around the Capitol on January 6th.
Yeah.
I reckon that's not bad.
Not very often that I agree with him, but yes.
The other thing I'd say to the Democrats, I reckon they've balls this up a little bit, is the fact they don't have a single Republican as an impeachment manager. They had 10 Republicans voting. Why not get one of them to be one of the impeachment managers?
Yeah.
Like
Kinzinger would
have been perfect.
He would have done it.
Like he's basically been an impeachment manager for the last 4 years. So why not get him to fill it officially? Anyway, the other thing I was going to say with the Democrats, which I don't quite get, is why they keep on talking about a short trial. Like they're not going to get their verdict. So the least they can do is put the evidence up.
Yeah.
Like Chris Murphy is saying...
I think they have fucked this up a bit. I don't know what they should have done instead, but it's clear it is just not... it's not going well.
Yeah, I mean, like Chris Murphy, this is a quote. This is a pretty straightforward trial. I never thought it needed to be as long as the Ukraine trial, which is a very complicated charge with a lot of witnesses and important testimony.
Actually wasn't that complicated.
I would hope we could get this done in a week. And like Lindsey Graham... I forget Lindsey Graham, but I'm going to talk about him. But I mean... I'd like to see Ben Sass be a witness.
Yeah.
Let me read a quote from Ben Sass talking to Hugh Hewitt. Sass, I'm sure you've also had conversations with other senior White House officials, as I have. Hugh Hewitt, I have. Sass, as this was unfolding on television, Donald Trump was walking around the White House confused about why other people on his team weren't as excited as he was, as you had rioters pushing against Capitol Police trying to get into the building. Hugh Hewitt, that said, Ben Sass, that was happening. He was delighted. Okay, Ben Sass, get on the stand.
Yeah.
Who told you that?
Yeah.
Let's get them on the stand.
Yeah.
Let's get Reince Priebus on the stand, who told a friend that he was stunned when Trump called him before the election and acted out the script that he was going to enact, including walking up to a podium and prematurely declaring victory on election night if it looked like he was ahead. He pre-planned the entire thing.
I've got to say, Democrats, forget Adam Kinzinger, who I've never forgiven for inviting Malcolm Roberts to Trump's inauguration. No, get Chaz as your impeachment manager.
Yeah, and I'll call them. I'm gonna call Rights Priebus.
Yeah.
First witness. Anyway, so I don't know why they'd have a short trial, and I mean, what else are they going to do? They're going to be filibustered everything else they do.
Because they're Democrats and they specialise in fucking things up.
Tim Kaine's from Accenture
They
Motions.
specialise in turning strong positions into weak ones.
The only reason you'd have this impeachment, sorry, just keep on this thread. The only
Yeah.
reason you have this impeachment is for deterrent for future presidents, right?
Yes, yeah,
There
yeah.
is zero deterrent if it's a censure,
Yes.
and if the trial just collapses in a heap. You got to embarrass him. You got to shame him at the very least.
Yes.
Otherwise, there's no point whatsoever.
Yes.
Anyway.
All right.
Okay.
We've only got a minute left.
All right. Oh, jeez.
I want to talk about Oklahoma.
Do your minute on Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
We'll do our COVID next time. but-
Oklahoma
yeah.
is looking to return 2 million doses of hydroxychloroquine that it secured at the height of the period of hydroxymania.
Oh, that is a lot of shade and
At
photo
the
right there.
same time, there's a state legislator in Oklahoma, as you've probably heard, because I think that we've got an extremely online audience, proposed legislation to have a Bigfoot hunting season.
Bigfoot hunting season.
Bigfoot hunting season.
Are we
in
sure
Oklahoma.
this-
It would be trapping only.
Are we sure this is for real?
You're not allowed to kill big. This was part of the legislation that he proposed in order to promote tourism
Okay.
in the mountainous region of I think northeastern Oklahoma.
Okay.
So there are Bigfoot sightings around there now. Has to be said, he didn't make many friends out of this because half of the state was like, why? He proposed a $25,000 bounty for Bigfoot. They're like, why are you wasting legislative time and money on this
But also,
fictional creature?
why are you offering only $25,000? Offer $1 zillion. They're not going to get Bigfoot.
Well,
Try offer as much money as possible. If there's someone's gullible enough to hunt
Well,
for Bigfoot,
Chaz,
attract them with
there's an obvious
$50
solution.
trillion.
No, attract them with 2 million doses of hydroxychloroquine.
Of course.
That's your reward for getting Bigfoot.
Or alternatively, you can just load your guns with hydroxychloroquine and kill Bigfoot that way when you're hunting.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it did much good.
By the way, I'm not one of these people who, and also he's come under attack from
Who,
people.
Bigfoot?
Well, from people who believe in Bigfoot and are like, no, dude, leave Bigfoot alone. Bigfoot's
The animal rights activists
not
are
there to be
defending
hunted.
Bigfoot.
Now, I'm not one of those people who, anytime legislation is proposed, immediately says unintended consequences. But that actually was the first thing I thought of this time. It's like,
Wow.
they're going to get like people turning up to the Oklahoma state legislature, which, by the way, only state legislature in the US that has an oil drilling derrick on the grounds of the legislature. They're just going to get people with like 15 dead raccoons inside a monkey suit.
I just want to put on the record that if I see any one of you out there walking around with a Bigfoot coat,
Yeah.
I'm going to throw red paint on that coat. I just want you to know. Don't shoot Bigfoot.
Yeah. We're very pro Bigfoot on PEP. All right.
Okay, that's a good
That
way.
is
Good note to
me
go out on.
Done.
We may or may not have one on Wednesday, depending on how things go. Otherwise, we've got a special guest next Friday. Is going to be Melina Wicks. We'll be back. And Dave will be
Excellent.
back the week after, but maybe Wednesday we'll see. You got some shit going on.
I've got some shit going on.
Okay.
It could involve the Constitution.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Peppers.
You just got Pepe.